Read the following statement. This meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. The recording of the meeting will remain online for 4 years, and if you are present in the chamber, you are consenting to appearing in the recording and broadcast, which may also be used for training purposes. Okay, so that deals with that. What I would like to do, we've got some new people here, is go around the table, just briefly introduce ourselves, if that's okay. So, as it says on the tin, I'm Andrew Gravels. I'm a councillor for Abbeydale and I chair this committee. So if we go this way, Mr. Clark.
Tom Clark, the Deputy Monitoring Officer at Gloucester City.
Councillor Howard Hyman, Westgate Ward.
Danny Maggs, Democratic Services. I'm doing minutes for this meeting.
Stephanie Chambers, Quedgeley Councillor.
Owen Weedold, Haverford Councillor.
Angela Conda, Councillor for Kingsholm and Wootton.
And Councillor Radley, one of the Elmbridge councillors.
Josh Taylor, Barnwood Councillor.
Louise Walker, Councillor for Abbeydale.
Lauren Richards, Democratic Services.
Tree Chambers de Boos, another councillor from Moorland.
Okay, that's everybody. Thank you for that. So on the agenda, back to the agenda. First item is the apologies for absence. Looking at Lauren as usual. Do we have any apologies?
We do, Chair. We've got apologies from Councillor Castle and Councillor Highland. Councillor Vidahold is substituting for Councillor Castle.
Okay, thanks for that. Any other apologies coming from members? No. Okay, declarations of interest. Any members required to make a declaration of interest that hasn't already been done? Take that as a no. Declaration of party whipping. To declare if any issues to be covered in the agenda are under party whip. I don't see anybody putting their hand up, any parties putting their hand up. Take that as a no. Minutes of the last meeting, pages 5 to 32. Is it okay if I sign those as a true and accurate record, please? Yep, cool. Public question time. I take it you're not a member of the public, madam? Okay. Here in an official capacity, okay. So I think, I think we don't want that minuted. Remark from not the vice chair, the spokes, yeah, so we don't want that minuted. Howard, thank you. Okay, and petitions and deputations. Somebody made the point in our pre-meeting, looking at Lauren and perhaps the Chief Exec, on petitions and deputations. We were wondering, Chief Exec and Leader, what sort of petitions could come to this committee? We've never had one.
I've never heard of one in my time here.
So, were you trying to indicate, Councillor Pullen? Okay. So, John, just quickly, why do we have this on then if there are no committees, no reasons why people should send a petition to this committee? I don't quite get that.
Chair, I can't see any point either, to be honest, because you're not a decision-making body in that sense. You're a sort of an advisor on decision making. So, I mean, we can happy for Democratic Services officers to look to see if it's constitutionally valid to remove it from your agenda, if you so wish.
Yeah. So, are you saying, John, that maybe we ought to just strike that through and not have this on the agenda?
I mean, I'd like to just check whether there's any constitutional reasons why not. But if so, if you'd like us to remove it from your agendas, and there's no reason not to, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you, Chair. As you've mentioned, that's something that's not working. Removing it might not be the answer. Perhaps we need to communicate more clearly that this function is here and that it is available, so people who feel that they would like this committee to engage with their issues could make use of it. So, yeah, if something isn't being used, it might indicate it's not needed, but it might also indicate that the people that would like to use it don't know that it's there.
So I think you make a fair point, and on health scrutiny, that's what we do, and people in Gloucestershire are aware that they can bring a petition or make contributions, but we need the clarity, first of all, what are the range of issues, and we need clarity first, what sort of issues and could come to this committee. Let's get that clarity and then make an effort after this meeting, if there is a case for petitions coming to our meeting, share it more widely with the public so they can make use of it. But until we get that clarity, let's hold fire. Okay, so that takes us on to item 7, financial monitoring Q3 report. I'm not sure who's taking that, Declan or Adrian? Both of you, thanks. Just as you're sitting down, can I just say for Declan, before we began this meeting, we borrowed Hadrian for 5 minutes for a quick briefing on how the figures are put together, what the brackets mean, and all the rest of it, and that was actually quite useful. And there are new members on the committee, so that was worthwhile to understand, Hadrian, exactly what you were telling us in your report. So I suppose my point in raising that is that we should never assume that everybody knows everything, particularly when we've got still relatively new members on here. And it was indeed a relatively new member who raised it, Hadrian. And I think you were happy to take that away and think about it in future. Is that okay? That was really helpful. Thanks. So over to...
Ivan, that's your side, Hadrian. I've just realised there's 2 boxes. Right. No, I just wanted to make a point in that. It's different if you look at it in colour. The green's good and red's bad. But in the past, I've had problems as well, instinctively understanding it, simply because in my old role, and when you're looking at a variance column, a negative was always bad and a positive was always good. There's 2 ways of looking at it, but I agree it's maybe something that we should take away and see if we can present it a little bit better.
Yeah, thank you to both of you. So I'm not sure who's going to... Oh, okay, we're going to have a debate on this now. I assume we were just going to note it and move on, but...
I don't want to debate this, but anything that's red and green may be difficult for people with red-green colour blindness to see, so we do need to be careful. I think closed brackets and open brackets are easier to read for some.
No, that's a fair comment. Okay. Councillor Chambers, Stephanie.
Sorry, Chair, and I missed the pre-meet, unfortunately, because that would have been useful for me as well. But yeah, I just wanted to make a point when we talk about members reading these documents, but these are publicly available, and the public also dip in and out every now and again. So it would be helpful if we could just have a paragraph maybe by these papers to show this is how you understand it. Just a paragraph or so to help members of the public.
Yeah, Hayden, back to you.
Yes, as I said in the pre-meet, I'm happy to add that narrative and just explanation, and I'm also happy to switch negatives with positives as well, if that fits with what makes more sense to people. So, I became acutely aware in the question I was asked that there was a need to explain the numbers a little bit more, and I also take the point with red and green. It's actually dark grey and grey when you look at it in black and white as well. But I was using red and green. I can use an alternate colour for the green, just because it also instantly you see that when it's negative or positive. Okay, hopefully that will. So I'll take that away as an action point for the next report. Okay.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. Okay, so Declan, Hadrian, I don't know who's going to introduce your report.
I'll introduce it. I'll be very brief because I know from previous meetings you don't like me to ramble on too long. And assume everyone's read the report. So I'll just say it's the third quarter report. It's slightly better. The outcome is slightly better than the last report by about 30,000 or so. But if you go through all the data, you'll see there's lots of pluses and minuses, and there isn't a consistent swing really. So I'm happy to take any questions really.
Anything to add, Hadrian?
Not at this point. As like Declan, I'll help answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, so open it up to members for questions, please. Looking around. Councillor Stephanie Chambers.
If it's okay, Chair, I have 4 questions that I pre-prepared,
Sure,
so
yeah.
I'll be as quick as I can. The first one was about IT, and we bought this new system, I think a year ago, and it's working well, but it didn't work well on budget. So I wondered whether there's any problems with the IT and if there is any more investment needed. I know we're slightly over budget in that respect anyway, but I think it's important to have it consistently working.
Yeah, just on that, and just from a very brief conversation that I overheard really before the meeting started, I think it was all related to a software update. Whether or not it was Windows or the software itself, I'm not entirely sure. But I understand that we have managed to rescue the recording, so it will be uploaded. I don't know when that's going to be, tonight or not, but certainly tomorrow. So, yeah, but it's my wife was watching it, and I think she was disappointed she couldn't hear it, but I'm not entirely sure. So I'm sure other people would have been as well. And by the time you upload it tonight or tomorrow, it's last week's news now, really. So there's going to be less interest. So I can't imagine too many people will watch it, which was unfortunate. But I think we've got a protocol in place now that will ensure that hopefully that won't happen again.
That's great, thank you. My next question is, it's to do with the private sector housing. So I accept if you don't know the answer straight away, happy to have something given. So it's really about the figure, and it's great. And I read the explanation about some enforcement fines, and that's come and made it a bit better. I just wanted to check, are those enforcement figures, are they ring fenced into the private sector housing team? Because I know from my experience they are a really, really good team, and they are very good in engaging and everything. So that money could go better, because when we have to enforce, I understand that, but the money can go better into engaging with landlords and to improve the communication between landlords and tenants and help them make improvements. Will it be ring fenced for that purpose?
Yeah, the answer is yes. It has to be ring fenced for the purposes of housing and that area. So it will, and that's in the generic cost of housing and homelessness provision within the council. So yes, it covers off there and it's ring fenced. Not not 100% necessarily for the sector that we call private sector housing, but for the whole, and to ensure that provision is there and they continue to do their work.
That's great, because I notice, we do get funding pots and things for homelessness and rough sleeping, whereas private sector housing, there is a large private sector housing market. And I think what was it called? The study that they did, I forgot the name of it right now, but the private sector housing study showed that a lot of the disrepair was in the private sector. So that is a good area to really, it would be good if that was spent in that area to stop a lot of tenants living in poor conditions. And also help educate the landlords, because, they're not all doing it to be bad. My next question was in relation to the customer services. And the explanation says there's been a reduction in operating hours of the shop mobility. So I just wondered, has this ended up in shorter operating hours as well?
I would have to take that one away. I'm not entirely sure if that's the case, but it's a good question, because what we're being told is basically we've improved the way we do it, and we've improved the IT systems that they're using. But whether or not we've reduced the hours or not, I'll need to take that away and find out and report back to the committee.
That's great, thank you very much, because I suppose my main concern was that if it has shortened the hours, I understand possibly, but as long as it's done in consultation with the users and that they are informed, is nothing worse, especially if you've got a disability, to make the effort to get all the way there and then you haven't got access to the equipment. Thank you. My last question is... trying to read my handwriting. Oh, it was to do with the baler repair costs, and I know we discussed that in a lot of detail. And then there was another one, wasn't there, some repair costs, and we had a sorting line, that was it. So I just wondered what sort of servicing, do we service all this equipment regularly and maintain it so it avoids breakdowns as much as possible?
Well, I would imagine we do. I think really the issue with this particular breakdown was it happened at the worst possible time of year. And it's just one of these events that the baler was bad enough, and it caused a lot of controversy at the time. The last thing we expected was this to happen as well. So I think it was more a case of timings, everything. These things are going to break down every now and again. But again, the actual specifics, I need to take it away and ask the question whether or not it was regularly serviced. I would be surprised if it wasn't, but I can't give you a definite yes or no answer.
I can. The Ubico have a schedule of maintenance for the various pieces of equipment. We have machinery that that gets used an excessive amount, shall we say, quite a lot. We've just been unfortunate. We've had 2 breakdowns in the same period. I am also advised that with all the repairs, they've done other repairs or other maintenance at the same time whilst it's been down, and I'm advised the machine is almost like new now. So fingers crossed, because you can never guarantee this sort of thing, but we should hopefully not see any in the next couple of years.
Councillor Hanna.
Are you able to tell me how much grant funding we got from the NHS towards the Health Inequalities Project?
$240,000, of which we've used 125.
So sorry, on that issue, on that item, that's an item I've got a couple of questions on. That's joint working with the Integrated Care Board around health inequalities, which some of you know I've spoken on previously. It's something that's really, for me, a key issue anyway. How does that work? Are you able, Declan, just to tell us just briefly how that works? I appreciate it's not within your portfolio. Happy to take that offline if you like, but I think that's key working, and it's good to see that we're joined out.
As regards how the financials work, I can't say this. Hadrian,
No,
cool. I'll come back.
I can't. That's one we will have to take away in terms of if you want more detail behind the joint working. We release the grant as we spend it. In terms of that, the 240 that Declan quoted comes from the table of earmarked reserves in 6.1 in the report, just so that it can be found. And that's amounts we've received over the previous 2 years, we're now spending it on projects. But the release is as the projects happen, and that's as much as I can tell you in that respect.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Adrian. I'll come back on that offline. So, Councillor Terry Pullen, and then Angela, next to you.
Thanks, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. The first one is about cemeteries and the crematorium, and the language that says it's tricky to budget on this, and I understand the sensitivities of that. But I had a look at the Q2 figure and it was overspent by 195, but now we've gone up to an overspend of 283, which is quite a jump. In fairness, we will be expecting that overspend to be reducing, but this one has gone out to, well, significantly. There are a number of issues in there, but one of them talks about a cremator, repairs to the cremator. So we had a piece of machinery that, again, it's a bit like the Ubico issue, really. Was that the only issue there? Sorry.
Yeah, there's a few issues there. Yes, it's true that the reason for it being worse than budget, but there's also, we've had to do a lot of repairs, health and safety related, which is impacted, and gas prices have remained stubbornly high as well. As regards the cremators themselves, we've got a big capital project in the budget because they will need to be replaced, and work started on all that already. So, but it's mainly an issue of not as many people using it, if you like, than have been in the past, and then that has a knock-on effect on the arbor and things like that. So there are one or two items in this budget which are difficult to predict. Planning is one of them. This is another one, and the housing subsidy is another. So we just have to make the best guess whenever we're setting the budget. And at the minute, it's a sort of good news story, if you like, that the services are not needed as much as they do. But there are other costs now, and as I said, it's mainly the repairs, maintenance, and the energy prices.
Okay, thanks. That's what I thought. But I was quite surprised to see the actual leap from 195 to 283 when we would really be expecting that to be reducing. Okay, thanks for that. And the other item is about markets and street trading, which is on point 5.13. And it mentions significant vacancies in the market. It is as well, isn't it? I mean, to me, to be honest, the market only looks about half full at the moment, and that is very worrying. And it mentions in the text about action being taken by officers to address vacancies and improve income levels. Now, this is in your portfolio, I think, isn't it? What sort of things can and should be done? Now, I do appreciate the market with greyfriars and everything. Obviously, the bigger picture hopefully is an improvement, but we've got a crisis at the moment with the market. As I said, it looks to me half of those units are empty.
We're trying to promote it by running all sorts of events. We did it at Christmas, we did it at Halloween, and at various other times of the year. I have a meeting with the market traders on Thursday. And I hope to be able to address a lot of these issues. I can say that there were issues with market traders' licenses, and we seem to have resolved those, and they've agreed to sign a new license, which is good news. But it's clear that we need to be thinking more and doing more to promote the market. Whereas a lot of good activities are taking place, it's not enough to attract more people in. So we will discuss these on Thursday and see if we can come up with something more imaginative than what we've been doing. But the officers that have been working with the market traders, I think, have been doing quite a good job. But we need to get more traders in there, I agree. But it's the uncertainty of it is something that concerns me a bit as we move closer to starting this new project. So I'm not quite sure what kind of a market we'll have whenever we start with the new improved indoor market.
Okay, thanks for that. I mean, I've just checked the figures again on last time. In Q2, the overspend was 59,000, but now it's 128. So, you know, we have a very serious problem here with the market.
We do. I think we're making some progress, but we're not doing anywhere near enough. in the sense that I think the market traders are a little bit less dissatisfied, shall we say, than they were before. But there's clearly a long way to go. I agree.
Thank you.
So Terry, councillor, you'll recall at the pre-meeting, we talked about people who wanted to move a resolution to full council, do it initially at their first contribution, so we're not getting these thrown into the debate at 9 o'clock or something. So given that was a contribution, obviously, are you minded to move any resolutions to full council? Okay, cool, thanks. Okay, so Angela, you are next. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I just, this is my ignorance really, the community infrastructure levy. Can you throw any light on that? Is it that it's early days in that scheme, so we don't have much to show at the moment? It's page 10.
It's an anomaly in this. It's one of those where the money comes in from the developments in a similar fashion to Section 106. It then goes off and out again into a pot for spend. So we shouldn't be seeing any up or down on it. It's included because we collect it and then put it in, and so that's why. But it's a development, a charge for big developments that we get in as funds. It then goes into a central pot and then gets allocated out by a special committee that looks at projects.
Thank you. And land charges. Okay.
Land charges are items that are placed on properties whereby either works in default, which is similar to what Councillor Chambers was referring to earlier, where we take a private landlord or a house that's in disrepair, and we do some work and we place a charge on that property for the future, such that when that property is eventually sold, an element of that money comes back to the council. That could be in 50, 60 years, depending on how long somebody lives in the property. The land charges income comes from the searches that are made in relation to when properties change hands. So yeah.
On this side. Sorry, can we just take you? Is that okay, Councillor James? Before we take Anne? Yeah, did you put your hand up?
Yeah, I just wondered, going back to the waste and recycling budget, how much of that 200 deficit is actually the repairs to the baler and the sorting line?
It's not so much the cost of the repairs, it's the loss of income as a result of them breaking down. How much of it? I'll go across to my technical expert.
The majority of it is to do with lost income and some repairs costs. So I haven't got an exact split between that, but the two things are intertwined. It's as noted in the report, we have health and safety requirements at the depot. So as Declan referred to, it was at the worst possible time when you're getting the excess Christmas recycling in. So such items will had to be baled to get them off site, but when they're baled in and mixed rather than sorted, we don't get any income. So it is lost income from that side of things. Yeah, and that makes up the vast majority of that. I'll leave it there.
Okay, cool, thanks. Anne Bradley, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I was interested, Councillor Wilson, what opportunities you see for actually generating more income and actually returning more money into the council, and where you see those opportunities to sort of boost returns.
I had made out a list, which I then conveniently forgot to bring with me, but I've scribbled out a new one here. Things like commercial assets. If you look at, there's a variance there. We're going to be down 266 for the year, but the last quarterly report, I think, was 446. So there's an improvement there, and part of that's a head lease that we signed in the King's Walk shopping centre, plus the empty units are now beginning to fill up. So there's those. Car parking in King's Walk and Eastgate shopping centres. There will be a paper coming before the next cabinet to change the equipment there and make it into ANPR, pay on arrival, or using apps, and that will, we think, save us 73,000 in the first year, 116,000 from the following year onwards. So that will help us bring in some more car parking income. We hope to save some money in-house, and we've already started this by bringing the post back into house and with a new contract for the outgoing post as well. Digitalisation of council services, bearing in mind digital exclusion, but where possible, we can find money savings there. Obviously, the forum is going to come online. And there's various other bits and pieces, but I sort of had a sudden idea somebody might ask us, so those are the few ones that I thought to scribble down.
I'd be particularly interested to know if there's been any progress in terms of the Hempstead Meadows, the car boot, and if there's any ideas of what might be coming in terms of that for the council.
We're at the final stages on that, so hope we should be able to make an announcement soon.
And my last one, Chair. You mentioned that there may be the need to replace some of the equipment at the crematoria, and that some of that might need a substantive long-term investment. Now might be a good time to investigate other methods of sensitive disposal to see if this is something that could make an impact in terms of energy costs. And so it, as part of that sort of wide-ranging scoping, when you're looking at different equipment, it might be a nice time to sort of see if this is a time to sort of make those changes.
I can confirm we're already doing that, and that's part of the big capital project that we're planning at the minute.
Lovely, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Just moving slightly further up the table, Josh, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. It seems to be my role this evening is to ask the silly explanatory questions, but I mean, it's just, I'm not quite sure what the letters in resources, SWRDA, actually stands for.
So can I just interrupt? When you've been on the council about 50 years, you will understand, but you make a fair point, and it was in the spirit of that we invited, I've never done it before, we invited Hadrian in to our pre-meeting to give us a basic 5 minutes on his not his terminology, but accountant's terminology. But Swerther, I knew what Swerther was once, but I wouldn't like to put too much money on remembering what it is now.
Apologies for trying to jump in there. in essence, I did it. You're not asking the daft questions. All questions are sensible questions in my book, especially if you don't understand. I can't remember if there was somebody over this side asked one of the earlier ONSs. It stands for the Southwest Regional Development Agency. The assets from which were passed to the City Council before my time, but 9 or 10 years ago, when the Southwest Regional Development Agency was ended. The assets cover, the most well-known one is that Southgate Moorings car park over there, but it includes a lot of other buildings that were being managed and being redeveloped. I suppose the other famous one is the Fleece, actually, but both which came across within the Southwest. So basically what happens is the income from the car park, which is probably the only income generating asset, don't take that as gospel, goes into what is called the regeneration reserve, which you will see in the appendix with the earmarked reserves, and the money from that is then being used to help with the redevelopment of the city, which includes money that is then allocated to help the costs of the forum, etc. Hopefully that explains that one.
Thank you, Chair. If that car park is ours, as it terms part of the city council's car parking, why is it with a different agency and why are the rules around it different to the other city car parks?
The answer to that is there is a restrictive covenant over it as it was handed to the council or handed across to the council from the South West Regional Development Agency to ensure that the proceeds from that car park are used for regeneration purposes, hence why the monies go into the regeneration fund.
That would make sense in terms of where the income goes to, but my understanding is that car park isn't. It has a different it has a different parking operator to the other city council car parks. So the covenant would just apply to where the money goes to, not necessarily how it's collected and how that space is managed. So I'd be interested to know that.
Sorry, that's the wrong question. It is the monies are collected and managed by Ash and Co. That agreement was already in place, and it comes to a conclusion at some point. At the point it comes to a conclusion, then I would expect there to be consideration for it to be rolled into the same mechanism.
Thank you.
My colleague from Aberdeen, Councillor Louise Walker.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question just relates to the table of planning figures, which is page 10, but I mean also mainly the planning point, which is on 5.25. I think you said earlier, obviously planning, it's an area where there's sort of almost limited control over, but there is quite a large negative figure there of 196. And I take your point, it's obviously planning applications are down, and there's a reference there to staff costs going up due to employing agency staff, but hopefully this will decrease in future. I mean, can I sort of assume that obviously every effort is being made to train and upskill staff and try and reduce the reliance on agency staff? But I guess there is very little we can do about trying to increase planning applications.
The irony about that is as well, I think we reduced the budget from last year because it was adverse to budget last year, and we fought it to a more realistic number. But again, we're still falling far short. And it's about there's about 4 or 5 items here which are very difficult to predict, and that's unfortunately one of them. And we don't really have much choice over the fees either. So unless we get some kind of a upturn next year, I don't know. But yeah, that's a hard one to budget for. Yeah, Adrian.
The answer is on Thursday we agreed some uplifted fees for planning. We actually had a bit like many things, they were controlled by statute, and they were held at the same level for about 10 years plus. About 18 months ago, maybe a bit longer, the government relaxed that and allowed them to be increased. And as of Thursday's budget, we have in the fees and charges book increased them by the amount that we're allowed to. There's also been a review. The planning team have been doing a review to look at the fees and charges which are more under our control, and those were booked into the fees and charges book last week. So there are steps being taken to improve the levels of income. We can't control, but like many of the income things, we can't control the volume, but we can control the pricing where possible. So within the constraints of the decent legislation.
So, well, hopefully planning applications might increase in the near future then. Okay, it's very helpful, thank you.
Normally going around the table, as you've noticed, but Angela, is it on that issue?
Yes, I went to a course at Warwick Conference Centre 6 weeks ago, run by Local Government Association Planning Advisory Service, and they mentioned there was a possibility that some more higher fees might be charged for retrospective planning applications. Can I ask if you've talked about that?
The answer is not that I'm aware of at the present moment, but I will take that point away and we will have those discussions.
Okay, can you make it brief then, please?
Of course I will. Of course I will. It's quite interesting, isn't it? And it's great that, you know, there has been some scope now to increase charges. My understanding, and as Declan will know, we've been talking about planning shortfall for years. My understanding is that we're not getting those big planning applications in at the moment. I mean, the next big one, I guess, will be around the market and Greyfriars. But because we're not getting those, we're still reliant on the small domestic stuff, and that isn't creating enough income, which begs the question. So, you know, we're budgeting on history rather than what's actually happening now.
To a question.
I would be inclined to agree with that, and that solves the problem with budgeting. You look at what's gone before, and it's hard to know what's in the pipeline, really. But I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Adrian?
In reality, the budget, as Declan referenced, as the income budget has gone down over, I think, the full time I've been with the council, we have been reducing the amount of expected income. There is also the difficulty, you know, the other element of this is the getting planners through the door into the council, and that side of the budget. We've had, you know, we have to, and as you reference, domestic applications actually create a significant quantum of work as well for the planning team to do. So there are multiple aspects to it, shall I say. We're working to get that planning team enhanced. There is the planning skills grant that we've had, of which is almost 100,000 which is actually being used to train and upskill, in reference to one of the points that was made. So that there are things in progress, but yes, it's always tricky to guess that income. I mean, the safest way is to take it to zero, but then that's kind of a tricky one as well.
So, Vice Chair Tree.
Right, thank you. My question is about the environment section, 5.21. One of the bullet points talks about the administration charge for new bins not raising the level of income expected to cover the cost of new bin provision. What was the expected amount and what was the reality on that?
Another one for me. In essence, in the budget prior to the recent one, there was an income estimated at £55,000. That has now all been removed following the budget last week. The actuality was we've had we're forecasting around about 20,000. So it was short by the 35, which was the original adjustment being made in the budget last week.
A second question. It's sort of a bit of a follow-on from Councillor James's question about the mechanical difficulties with sorting line. How much money did we actually lose?
That one, I can't give a figure on. To be honest, it would be in the region of. I will give a guess, but it's a guess, and I want it taken as that. I would give a guess at about 30k, but it depends. We could probably come up with calculations, but the recycling prices change, and the timing of that, and it was to do with the fact that we were having to send out bales of mixed. We sent out the minimum number of bales that we had to ensure we kept within the health and safety limits, which is the priority.
Thank you.
So if I could just have a couple of questions now. So then we'll come back down for a second time. So at the council meeting last week, I only spoke very briefly once. That's the longest I've ever been. I've not wanted to speak at a council meeting. I was just getting over a chest infection, but I was listening. I was listening very carefully. And when Councillor Hilton was moving the budget, I'm pretty sure I heard him say that it wasn't what the figures we're getting today are adverse to budget. And I think the words he used were, and that's because the previous administration fiddled the books. And so, Councillor Hilton, can you explain what you meant by that? Or if not, withdraw that statement? Because having been a member of the Cabinet under Richard Cook and Hannah Norman, that was the last thing that would have ever been on their mind. So that's a serious accusation to make. And I'm sat with the monitoring officer who can... Pardon? Sorry, I've demoted him, the deputy monitoring officer. And that is not the sort of contribution that we want to hear at full council about members fiddling the books.
I can't remember exactly what I said during the meeting, and we haven't had the broadcast. Until we've had the broadcast, I shan't be commenting on any comments that have been made, because you might have misheard what I said.
Okay, so I did talk to colleagues before we began this meeting, and they heard what I heard, but you're saying that you don't recall making those remarks, is that right?
I can't recall everything I said in that meeting, and therefore, until I've seen what I said, I'm not going to comment.
Okay, the remarks were pretty sensational, and I personally think they were disrespectful to previous members of the council. So we'll go back through the transcript of that and see what exactly was said. So Declan and Hadrian, a couple of questions from me. Running through your presentation, which actually is very clear once we've got over the sworders and should there be brackets and not brackets, it's actually it's not an easy document to read, but pretty straightforward and not too much jargon in there. One of the themes that runs through it is that we're making savings because we're not filling vacancies. And that comes up 2 or 3 times, and I'm just trying to quickly find a couple of examples. So, reading from your report, the favourable variance in economic development service area arises from current staff vacancies. Further down in the report, we have a sentence which says, as noted, the finance and corporate budget is favourable due to staff retirement and the associated recruitment gaps. And there are other examples. One could almost say we're the vanishing council, but whatever council we are, we're certainly a council which is saving a lot of money by not filling vacancies. Is that fair?
Interesting question, because a lot of that there was a recruitment freeze from January to March last year under the previous administration, and then when that was lifted, there was a bit of catching up had to be done. There are 1 or 2 posts where people have left and it takes time to recruit them, but there's no deliberate policy of freezing any recruitment. That the only time that's happened in the last year was, as I said, the last quarter of the last financial year. But then there was a bit of a lag creeps in. So that's why you're seeing those, because if you recall, the question I think was asked on the Q1 financial report, and that was the answer really. But as things stand, there's no vanishing council now, and there's no recruitment freezes. This takes time when people leave to recruit more people back in, and it can be frustratingly slow at times, but it's important that we get the right person. So I can understand why. But so the answer to your question is no, that was a historical thing that we inherited back at the beginning.
Declan, I think what I heard was pretty reassuring. So in a nutshell, are you saying to us as a committee, there really are no serious vacancies which we have yet to fill?
I wouldn't say there's no serious vacancies that we've yet to fill, but we are actively recruiting to fill all the posts that we have to.
Thanks for that. And a question for Hadrian. Hadrian will know that I've been trying to get my head around how much council tax remains uncollected, what the arrears are. And looking at the figures that you gave me, Hadrian, and correct me if I've misinterpreted them, that wouldn't be the first time if that's the case, as you know. So I'm reading from the box, the table, You say current arrears at January 2025, are you with me, are 7.1 million, of which 800,000 of that is due to the City Council, is that right? Just over 1 million to the Police Authority, 5.3 million to Gloucestershire County Council. That's how much remains uncollected. And first of all, if you could confirm or tell me I've not interpreted them in the correct way, is that a fair assessment of where we are?
There are 2 points here, Chair. The amount of almost 7.2 million, which is quoted as the current outstanding debtors or outstanding debt, ranges from when council tax started in 1993 through to and that's the historic debt which we're talking about here, is up to March 24. So it's running from 1993 to March 24, which by my quick calculations is 31 years. I could be wrong. Of which there is 7 million. It's a statutory debt that we can't write off in the same. We have a provision against this debt, and we provide, and when we do the collection fund and the collection, because we collect for the preceptors, which you've quite rightly mentioned, of the police and the county council, who actually take the bigger chunk of that council tax. But if somebody didn't pay their council tax in the year 2000, we still have an obligation to try and collect that cash, and it stays on the record up to the point where they die. And that notification comes through. So the number is one of those numbers that will inevitably always get bigger. The secondary point to the question, to the answer I gave you in written form, just because the committee here can't see it, was basically, as at the 30th of November 24, which was when the numbers were first asked for, we had 9.4 million outstanding, and we're now at 7.2. So it's showing that in that period, there's been a significant collection of that historic cash. But again, that would have primarily been the amounts relating to the 20s, the amounts outstanding from 23 and 24, more likely. Does that answer your question?
Really helpful. That's really helpful, not least because you sort of confirmed that at long last I've grasped what you were trying to tell me. And I look at those figures, and I do understand the context of you go back a long way, and statute doesn't allow you to write them off. And I understand that. But I look at those figures, and my mouth just waters when I think of what we as local councillors could do with those sums, not just here, but at the county council and also the police authority. So Declan, I'll leave that with you as something that if you and the administration can, I was going to say redouble your efforts, but not take your eye off the ball, that would be very good news for all three listed there, the police, the county council and Gloucester City Council. I'm certainly happy to give you suggestions where any of that money could be spent in Abbeydale and Abbeymead. So get my plug in there first. Just being fair, doing it alphabetically, just being very fair. Okay. So I think I said, well, I haven't said as much as I want to, but I'm conscious that lots of other people want to come in as well.
Hadrian just wanted to follow.
Yeah, sure, Hadrian. Yeah.
Can I just add a little bit of further context, because as provided to your good self, the actual collection rate for the current year 24-25 is sitting at 92%, and in any one year, well, the current 24-25 level of council tax being collected on behalf of all three organisational authorities is 86 million. So it goes up each year, but it's 86 million that's collected, that's billed annually. Just to put some context behind that, 9 million over 31 years.
So the whole financial picture is very complicated. But thank you and your colleague Declan, Deputy Leader Finance, for the work that you're doing. So if it's okay with you, we're going to go around the table now for a second time. Is that okay? So I've got Howard, Steph, Alwyn, and somebody down there. So Howard, you'll go.
Yes, excuse me if I seem ignorant about this, but I'm not understanding paragraph 5.11 on page 8. Because halfway down, it says, has led to the IT spend being forecast to be adverse to budget by 56k, an improvement on the Q2 forecast of 56k. Could you explain that to me?
That's one of those strange coincidences where the overspend or the adverse budget spend at Q2 was double 56, which you can't get in darts, but you know it's now been halved to 56 at the current point in time. So it's one of those that makes a strange statement because you're talking about two different 56s. So at Q2, we were 112. I was giving myself stalling time to do that calculation. 112,000 overspent. We're now 56,000 overspent. So yeah, it's just a strange coincidence.
Councillor Chambers, Stephanie.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for giving an opportunity, because things do pop up when other people speak, so thank you. So firstly, on the council tax explanation, which I wasn't going to discuss, but Hadrian, I just really wanted to thank you for everything you've explained this evening, and Declan, because you really helped clarify the detail, and it really does help, so thank you. In regard to the council tax, do we get paid, and how are we paid to do these collections? Because historic debt takes more than sending a letter and it having go into the bank and then passing it on. Do we get paid by the other sectors, or how do we get paid for collecting that debt? Because are we incentivised to do that as an authority? I know it's part of our moral thing to do that, but we can't do everything at a loss. So do we get paid well for it or not?
The debts are seen as a global debt. There are admin grants that come from the government to cover some of the work in terms of the administration of council tax. The collection fund, which you do not want to go into, and I don't want to try and explain, but the collection fund is where we collect in that total amount for all three, and then that gets split up. We put in provisions. We would create a provision based on historic debt to make sure that we don't take the whole hit within Gloucester City Council. It's spread across. We're incentivised because we want to collect that money to spend on Councillor Gravel's ward.
Somebody's taking the minutes. We're doing it in alphabetical order.
but no. So it's basically we don't take a hit. It's a share. It's a shared. The cost of managing the council tax is shared within that collection fund, and then we get various admin grants. And if they change things, we get things called new burden grants that come through from the government to help us pay for that admin.
Thank you. That was really, really useful, because I just wanted to make sure we weren't, because managing payment plans, we've had for a couple of years a cost of living crisis, and it might mean more people can't pay on time. So payment plans, which I know the council offer, which is good, but just to manage that can cost quite a lot of money, can't it, in time? So thank you for that answer. My next thing that I had listed was to thank you, Josh, because the question you answered, I was really happy with the explanation. It helped me, and I'm sure it helps a lot of other people. So thank you. And there is no silly question, because it helps me, definitely. Thank you. And I've been here longer than you. Just to comment on the recruitment freeze, obviously that was done at a really critical time with the temporary housing accommodation crisis hit, and we had to do something to manage that instantly. Otherwise we would have, and we were, amongst other authorities, we were complimented of how quick we acted and how we kept that under control. But I know it's not over yet, and there could be more things to come. So, just watch that one just in case. the questions I have, and I am somebody that particularly likes detail to understand things, and that's why I find these reports interesting. However, one of the things that I noticed isn't there, you know, with the Uber code breakdowns, we don't see those things, and planning, we don't see, you know, how many small applications, domestic small ones, how many over 10 we have, etc. So I know there's a system that the council have called Pentana that, as a cabinet member, I had access to. I don't know who else does, but I found that really, really useful. And you could quite easily, I could pop into there, see something, it has little notes on it, and you can understand where all different items are at within the council at one time. Would you consider opening that up to other members so they can just pop in and out, maybe save officer time in answering questions? They may take some time to understand the use of it, but with training, maybe.
We'll look into it because it is a useful tool, I agree. It's sort of information that councillors should have information to. So if you let me take that one away, I'll see what I can do.
Thank you, Declan.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned the cemetery, and particularly the crematorium, having about 2.5 million spent on it next year. What will the impact be on the residents of Gloucester? Because that level of spend would probably cause some disruption. Will we still have cremation services available at all times? Will there be a reduced service, or will people have to go outside of the city?
We will try and keep a service going, but we haven't even formalised the plans yet. We're sort of at the architecture stage at the minute. So it'll all depend on how we're going to do it. So I can't answer that yet. It's too early.
Okay. The reason I asked the question is I'm aware that a local council nearby was closed for a while, and that led to people having to go as far as Swindon for similar services, and that's a very difficult thing for many people to do. So we need to ensure that our plan is cognizant of that very important thing that we're doing.
Court, no other people indicating to speak. Okay. Get in, Court.
I barely had time to turn, Mr. Chair. The other question I have is the reserves that we have, roughly 3.8 million. Where are those currently held, and are we earning some interest on that?
The reserves is an accounting mechanism to record what we've set aside. In essence, it will either be internal funding that we use to fund things, and then as we need to borrow for whatever's been held in the reserves to spend, then we will take it at that time. So we manage our cash flow. If you want to read the Treasury Management reports and the Treasury Management strategy, that will explain it. But yes, it's a case of we manage the cash flow to it. But the reserves, it's one of those misconceptions that somewhere there's a bucket that just has 3.8 million in it. That would be poor finance, because you borrow, you get that funding when you need it, but you set aside the spend. So that hopefully that answers your question.
It does indeed. I was asking for a friend.
So looking around the room quickly, I don't see any other hands going up. Nope. Okay, so we'll close this session now. But thank you so much for your patience and for your courtesy and for answering all of the questions very fully and not dodging any of them. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, leader, chief exec, I don't know what he wants to go first. MD, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. The
the world of local government devolution has been quite a rapid one in the last couple of months. So what I think I'll do is just set out a brief timeline of what's happened since December and where we've got to now. And then the leader may wish to add any more from a policy position. So just from a factual perspective, on the 16th of December, the Labour government published an English devolution white paper. It was just before recess, setting out how they plan to deliver their manifesto pledge to transfer power out of Westminster through devolution and to fix the foundations of local government. The English devolution white paper had two main elements. The first was the first part of that white paper was focused on creating a new framework for devolution. In other words, transferring powers from central government to local government. And the second part of the white paper concerned local government reorganisation. So the first part, the devolution framework, set out the government's ambition really to push ahead with creating what they call mayoral strategic authorities across the country. Where mayors are created to sit across effectively combined council areas and to have additional powers delegated to them and devolved to them around the subjects of transport and local infrastructure, skills and employment support, housing and strategic planning, economic development and regeneration, environment and climate change, health, well-being and public service reform, and public safety. And then the second part of the white paper concerns local government reorganisation. There remain in England 21 two-tier areas. That's areas where there are both county councils and district councils. And in the white paper, the government set out its intention that it expected local government to reorganise over this parliament and the next one. In other words, to get rid of all of those 21 two-tier areas and replace them with a unitary council structure. They also set out that some smaller unitary councils outside those two-tier areas may need to also reorganise or merge with other councils if they were struggling to remain financially viable. Accompanying this letter, this white paper, the Minister for Local Government, Jim McMahon, wrote to the leaders of all two-tier councils and neighbouring unitary authorities on the same day, sort of talking about the white paper and giving us further detail over what he wanted two-tier areas to think about with regards to reorganisation. Basically, that letter set out that he would be inviting in January or February those two-tier areas to begin work to commence to submit proposals for reorganisation locally towards unitary local government. And in this letter, he also set out that some areas he was looking for some areas to say whether they were interested in joining some sort of devolution priority programme, where they would be taking forward those proposals to both create mayoral strategic authorities and to reorganise on an accelerated timeline. And in that letter, the minister also said that if needed, he would be minded to lay secondary legislation to postpone local county council elections that were due to take place in May 2025 by a further year, if that would help unlock devolution and the timing work to create these new sort of shadow unitary councils. But then for every other area, he expected elections to take place as scheduled in May 2025. And then he was going to write to us again in January. So that was the letter that came out just before Christmas. Fairly soon after that letter was received, the leader of the county council indicated to the leaders of all the district councils in Gloucestershire that he was minded to submit a case to the minister seeking to postpone the county council elections and seeking for Gloucestershire to be effectively added to this devolution priority programme. I believe that was a decision that he then took to a county council cabinet meeting in early January, I think in the second week of January, which was the deadline we'd been given was to respond to this request to delay elections by Friday the 10th of January. And I believe the county council cabinet met the day before, or possibly even that day, I'm not sure which. The leader of our council, along with the leaders of 4 other district councils in Gloucestershire, did not feel that that was the right approach. And the 5 of them co-signed a letter which was also sent to the minister recommending that the elections continue as planned. In early February, the minister made a ministerial statement and then again wrote to the leaders of all of the two-tier council leaders across the country. And that letter, if you want it, is on the website, and I can send members of the committee a link if they want to read the letter in more detail. But basically that letter set out, and that ministerial statement set out which areas of the country were going to be part of the devolution priority programme. Gloucestershire was not on that list, along with a number of other county areas. So in other words, the county elections will go ahead as planned in May 2025 for Gloucestershire County Council. And this letter that was submitted to the leaders of in all the two-tier councils in Gloucestershire on the 5th of February basically gave a bit more detail and effectively formally invited Gloucestershire to now come forward and submit proposals for local government reorganisation. And because Gloucestershire was not on the priority programme, the request was for any proposal to be submitted by the 28th of November. So we have until the 28th of November of this year to submit any response to that invitation for local government reorganisation. The Minister also asked for an interim update to be submitted on or before the 21st of March, in other words, later this month, setting out a bit more detail about what proposals were being considered and so on. So since the 5th of February, which is just under a month ago now, officers across all 7 councils, along with some other key stakeholders, have been working up work streams really to progress advice for councillors across all of those authorities to consider in terms of where they want to go in terms of local government reorganisation. The reason this is a verbal update this evening rather than any report is there is as yet nothing written down to share with you or with any other organisations in terms of even the draft response by the 21st of March. That's still under development. If there is any document produced by that date, almost certainly, and if it goes before Cabinet, which is currently on the order paper for next week's Cabinet, but as yet I'm not sure if there will be a paper or not by that stage. But if there is a paper, the recommendation will purely be to note, because as of yet, there is no decision. Until we get closer to the November date, there will be no decision for this council or any other council in Gloucestershire to make. So as far as I'm aware, no council is trying to make a decision in the next month about what to do on local government reorganisation. We've been given until the 28th of November, and as far as I'm aware, all 7 councils are going to use that time to work up the proposals in a bit more detail, do a bit more thinking around it, and then the councils may be minded to submit a proposal by that 28th of November date. So I think what I probably can tell you, because I don't think it's a secret, is at the moment there are three main proposals under consideration for local government reorganisation in Gloucestershire. One proposal is for the whole of Gloucestershire to become a single unitary, population size of about 650,000. The second proposal under consideration is to create 2 unitary councils for Gloucestershire, broadly matching the geographies of East and West. So that would be looking at Gloucester, Forest of Dean and Stroud on one side, with a population of about 350,000, and then Cheltenham, Tewkesbury and Cotswold on the other side with a population of about 300,000. And then the third option under consideration, because of the size and historic identity of this city, is a proposal around whether or not Gloucester itself is large enough and capable of delivering services as a unitary council in its own right, and then looking at what other unitary structures of local government might sit around that Gloucester area. Again, the leader might want to elaborate on this, but I think the leader has made clear in public statements that if there is to be local government reorganisation in this county, he believes it's important that we look at the boundaries of any such unitary councils that are created, so that decisions affecting areas that identify themselves with Gloucester are made by that unitary that includes Gloucester. So in other words, places like Hardwick, or possibly even Upton St Leonard's, that might consider themselves as identifying with Gloucester, should be in the same unitary council as Gloucester is in, rather than being made by decisions made somewhere else. So there are probably three main proposals for local government reorganisation under consideration. We're not being required to make a decision on any of those by this March interim reporting deadline. We're just being asked to tell government what proposals are under consideration, and we will carry on working up those proposals to advise councils between now and the 28th of November. I think I will stop there and see if the leader wants to add anything to that initial statement.
I'm quite happy to take any questions at the moment. I think John's done a really comprehensive job of giving you an overview of where we are in the process.
So, Jeremy, leader, it'd be helpful if you could just outline your idea that the Chief Executive, the MD, was just outlining, with Gloucester being a unitary with surrounding parishes. Could you amplify that a bit, please?
Sure. There's, let's say, three options. The first one quite clearly is a single unitary for the whole of the county, and if you had a single unitary for the whole of the county, Gloucester would be a small part of that county when it comes to the population of that local authority. It would have about 18% of the membership of the new unitary county. And of course, it would lose all its influence, or the influence it's now got through the City Council about the development and the regeneration of the City of Gloucester. A Greater Gloucester Council, which would have all the surrounding parishes, such as Churchdown, Brockworth, Hynham, Hardwick, Brookthorpe and Wadden, up to St Leonard's, all those are Innsworth, all those around the city would be part of that. That would take the population at this point in time up to 178,000, and probably rising to 200,000 within 10 or 15 years, because we know there's a lot of development around there. I've basically said to others that area needs to be in the same unitary authority. Doesn't necessarily mean it's exclusive, but it needs to be in the same unitary authority. The split that's been proposed an east and west one is rather ridiculous in that all those areas around the north of Gloucester, which are all part of the joint core strategy and all part of the housing that we need for the city of Gloucester, would be in another authority. In other words, the people living in Longford, right next door to the people living in Long Levens, would be in a different local authority. And it really wouldn't be ideal for long-term planning. And we've got to remember that any boundaries that we get for the future of local government are going to be there for, well, this time round this was 50 years. So that's the fundamental principle of making sure that the Greater Gloucester area, the city of Gloucester and the areas around it that are part of the bigger community, and they're part of the NHS planning, they're part of the education area that the county council looks at, that they're all in the same local authority. If you were to have a single Greater Gloucester, the current city itself would have 74% of the membership of that authority. Therefore, the influence that we would have as the people of the city would be much greater than the single county unitary. I've made no decision on what I think is best. I can see the benefits of Gloucestershire County Council. I've served on there for 28 years, and there's certain high-level stuff, but I also know the benefits that this council has had in progressing the regeneration and the fine-tuning of the community of Gloucester. And I think there's a danger we would lose that. So it's one of the three options. There needs to be one hell of a lot of work to look at the pros and cons of each proposal. When you look at the size of something like Bath in North East Somerset, that's around 180, 190,000. It's very similar in size. And that's one of the areas that you might be working with in combination with. If we go in with the West of England combined authority, or if we were to go to the north with Hereford and Worcestershire, Herefordshire is a unitary authority with a population of 188,000. So we're talking about similar numbers. I know the government says 500,000, but we do know there are other cities of a similar size that are looking at their own proposals for a unitary council based on their cities and the surrounding areas. So I think it's worthwhile progressing that one. What we don't want to do is for them to progress it and get that, and then you realise you didn't progress any plans for that, and that you've missed the opportunity. But we need to look at all the details. How you operate this, whether adult social care is better in two unitaries, or all those sort of things have got to be looked at over the next few months. So that's the fundamental place where I'm coming from. And that's the reason why I sent the letter to Jim McMahon saying the elections must go ahead, because I couldn't see how we could fast track reorganisation in Gloucestershire and get it right and actually test all the model there. There's just no way it could be done. We'd have ended up with something that we could well have regretted, or, you can create a single unitary, but how you organise that single unitary is something for discussion as well. And I know in Wiltshire they created more devolution. They've done the same in Somerset, though I think Gloucester having its own council is really something that we ought to seriously consider proposing. It will eventually be decided by the minister and the governments, but discussions need to be had.
So just before I put a quick question from me, I ought to place on record my thanks to both of you for turning up this evening. We were due, I think, weren't we, to have the report on Portsmouth, which was going to Cabinet. Then that report was filled, so we talked about what issues could we bring to plug that gap. So I am grateful to both of you for turning up. Just quickly, Leader, before I open it up to others, your idea of the Gloucester unitary with the surrounding parishes, if you were living, for people who are living in those parishes, how will they get a say on where they want to go? Will there be a referendum, a vote in each of those parishes?
No, there's not going to be a referendum. What there's going to be is that in developing those proposals, they need to, in the paper we got on the 5th of February, it says that we should do some consultation and get ideas. But also, if the government decides on an option, there will be statutory consultation that they will have to progress. Back in 73, of course, Gloucestershire was going to be part of a bigger unitary authority with Hereford and Worcestershire. It got dismissed, and we ended up with Gloucestershire County Council as a separate unit. But we also ended up with issues to do with the boundaries around the city of Gloucester. And we know now the problems we're having with not having we're not able to deal with that. You know, they're now being houses being built in the Tewkesbury area. That's all part of the city itself, the Greater Gloucester area. It's all part of the community. It's all interlinked, and really having all those things interlinked together and having local councillors from those areas all working together to make decisions is probably the most effective way of developing our city and the areas around it. That's why I'm saying they should all be in the same local authority, whatever the model is, because otherwise, if they're separated, you're just once again carving up the edge of Gloucester and making and frustrating the good development of the city of Gloucester, its economy, its environment, and everything else. And there was errors made in 1973, in my view, in the way they drew up the district council boundaries, and Gloucester's been constrained ever since. And then we now are experiencing the issues we having to deal with, because that's where all our housing need is going to be, because we haven't got the land left within the city boundaries.
Thank you for that. I'll present it up to members, staff chambers, councillor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jeremy and John, for your explanations. There's a couple of things that I just wanted to point out. First thing, really in relation to process. So with the March date, it's obviously very soon, and you said there's going to be very unlikely that you can bring any sort of paper if you do. If it doesn't, well, it's not going to come to, I presume it's not going to come to council for full approval or anything. So my point is, if that's done solely from the leader and the cabinet's point of view, really, I'd really like it. And I don't know what the previous letter said, but that it is very clear that that's come from the administration and not everybody in this council. If it doesn't, you know, if we all haven't had a chance to look at it. So that's just the one thing. And then in regards to the November issues that we get to have our point of view on, I think we've got enough time to make sure that does come as a council paper, and it'd be good that that paper is a collaboration from this council, without trying to, you know, not saying anything bad, but this is minority administration. I think that's really, really important, and to make clear in the March letter as well that it's coming from a minority, so they know that, you know, it's not a whole council issue, not a whole council decision or a point of view. And that we've done no public consultation. I presume they know that from the March one, that we've done no public consultation. In relation to the point of Greater Gloucestershire, I'm still open. You know, there's a lot of work that's got to be done. I'm still open to look at all options, and I think that's important that we do when we see the data coming forward. But I think it's wrong to say that Gloucester will get lost in a bigger authority. You know, highways works okay. We still get our roads dealt with equally as do other areas. And I think although we as councillors all advocate for our local wards, we're not vindictive enough to say, well, we don't want something going on in another ward of other side of the city. We all are happy to see improvements to our city, and I'm sure we would be if we were on a bigger council as well. So I think that's not necessarily a thing that would happen. In an example, we had to bid for all the Levelling Up funds that this city has received from central government, and I think the government have been quite generous in what we've got in Levelling Up to do things across our city. So I think that's not necessarily an issue that will happen. But like I said, I am open to all options. My only sort of line would be that it is a full council point of view that gets put across to the Minister in November.
I'll come back on that. The letter that will go to the Minister on the 21st of March might be signed by more than one council leader, or it might not be. But the one that will come, if necessary, just from Gloucester City Council would just be the reason, the point that why we asked for the elections to go ahead, because we weren't in a fast track position, and we'll make it quite clear in that letter that there are three options, core options that are being considered by council leaders across the county at this point in time, and that there's plenty of work that we need to do that. I mean, I think there might well be a case when we look at the future of the city of Gloucester is to have a meeting with the Minister to talk about the issues, because, you know, Gloucester would effectively not have its own council in the future. And it's a big area. It would be one of the biggest areas in the country. And if it would just have a town council, you know, it would be the largest in the country. And therefore, we would lose a lot of influence. And I've sat on the county council for many years, and I can see the benefits of but when you come to deciding things like the forum, that would never have happened under county council. It's purely a commercial option. It's about regenerating the city. We would have much more difficulty getting that done under a unitary county. That's just my experience of being a member of Gloucestershire County Council for all those years. There are things that the county does well, and there are things that the city council does well. And that's the real disappointing thing about the white paper, is effectively it could just remove the local authority that we have in Gloucester, and all the good work that we've done across all parties for years and years and years. And we wouldn't have a council of any note for the first time in 542 years. Just go and we'll look at all the things that the council's done to improve the city of Gloucester in all those years. And that's the real problem. The unitary council can be big, and Andrew will know, yeah, I can't really get up in council and start talking about things like the forum or other issues at the county council in the same way I can here, because you're talking about higher level policies, and it's very difficult to talk about those issues at the moment the way the county is structured. Though I understand in Wiltshire and Somerset they've created devolved areas and how they're working, so that's an option in the single unitary. But everything will have, all of them will have pros and cons. They all have pros and cons, and we'll have to think about what might be the best for the city of Gloucester. And that's my key interest, is what's best for the city of Gloucester, making sure that, or whatever's left after we give up our times on the councils, is what we've set up a system which allows the city of Gloucester to continue to benefit from the influence of its elected members, and therefore the influence of the members of the public. And that's what I said. Under Greater Gloucester, we would effectively have 74% of influence within that council chamber. Single unitary for the Gloucestershire, we'd go down to 18%. We be having battles with others across the county to get funding into the city. We'd probably win a lot of those, but we'd still be having those battles.
Chair, is it okay if I just come back briefly, or just really quickly? As the leader of this council, though, do you think you need to be a bit more cautious, because there will be a public consultation, and grand statements such as we wouldn't have a council after 542 years, or the forum wouldn't have happened, are quite dangerous statements and influential to, when they're not facts as such, are they? They're an opinion. So without the work being done, do you not think that's dangerous, and it could influence some public opinion if those things are just those sound bites are put across?
Well, I don't think they're sound bites. I think the fact is that's a reality that since it was 1483 that we've had a mayor and sheriff, mayor and councillors that looked after the interests of Gloucester, and we've got to make sure that we don't lose that completely. We need to have that influence, and that's the reality of the situation. I'm just expressing an observation about the risks. And like I say, you know, we've been talking, John and me, about this and that, and we get to the point where something else comes in, you think, oh, that model would be better for this area. I don't know the answer, but what I do know is we should make sure that the three options are properly looked at. I think the problem with the split in the county down the middle is where the advocates have drawn the boundaries. If they drew the boundaries around that Greater Gloucester area, then, you know, puzzling up with the Forest of Dean would create a unitary authority, which would be also viable. But that proposition hasn't come forward yet. But that's what happens with the work, because what the government was saying, what some people are advocating, running headlong into these single unitary, is that we couldn't do this because of the current division boundaries and the ward boundaries. Whereas, in actual fact, if you're going to have a new local government structure in Gloucestershire, do it right, get the boundaries right, get the communities based on the communities, and then draw up the number of councillors you need for that local authority, work out the new ward boundaries and do it properly. Don't rush into it. And that's what the danger was. The leadership of Gloucestershire County Council, they were just running headlong into it. And I think there were some that just wanted not to go ahead with the county council elections. It was really far too fast. And that's why myself and 4 other district council leaders said, please don't do it. We're nowhere near ready to propose a form of unitary government in Gloucestershire at this point in time.
Yeah, thank you for that. I just really think it should be cautious, because we've all talked about different things in different areas, that there are ways that civics has been retained, there are ways of devolving powers to a town council, and to say things don't happen, this is a whole new setup. This isn't county council. This is a whole new way of looking at everything from the top down and just thinking, how can this best work now with the current, you know, technology, everything that goes on now. So I think we just need to be really cautious before the public consultation goes out. Yes, work needs to be done to give options to them, but actually from your position as leader, stating things like that, I think it's like scaremongering. So I just really would like things to be more careful than that, because we don't want to get into a huge battle of what we want. We want to work together in this room, well, in the bigger room of the council, to figure out what is best from the consultations. And hopefully there's a lot of public consultation that goes on in person, like we have done with the SLP. So you've got the consultation online that works really well, but they used one of the empty units in King's Walk and things like that. Has to be and different wards need to be looked at. Like you said, this is an issue that it hasn't been done for 50 years. It's going to impact residents for such a long time. So I just really want this to be seen as a really whole council, whole ward representation of this city.
Yeah, sure. And I think we'll all have of opinions. And I don't think I've been scaremongering at all. I'm just telling you some of the initial thoughts I have about what the pros and cons are of different models. And there are pros and cons of different models. You know, if you split the county down, then the two, what do you do with Gloucestershire Fire and Rescue Service? How do you operate that? What do you do with adult social care and children's services? So you've got to look at all those things. There's no absolute correct model. And I remember telling David Miliband when he came to Gloucestershire in 2005, talking about unitary models. And I said, it's really difficult in the county of Gloucestershire, because you've got 2 major populations that aren't necessarily as big enough, Gloucester and Cheltenham, as their boundaries are at the moment. And then you have the size of them is too big, but also a bit too small, and that's why the area around the city, those parishes and those, Churchtown is a big place, and all those other areas, if they're all linked together, then it's big enough to be a unitary authority. It's certainly bigger than some other ones. And again, as I say, there are other cities that are considering their own bids that are currently district councils. and we don't know what's going to be happening. We are members, of course, as well of the Key Cities Group, which we're working with as well.
Anybody else? Sorry, Angela and Terry. Angela first.
Thank you, Chair. It really worries me that Jim McMahon is basing his ideas on areas of 500,000 people, because Gloucestershire obviously doesn't conform in any way, looking at it through numbers, and populations fluctuate. The amount of housing we're looking at the moment, our population is going to go up, however you count it, wherever you draw the line. And I know when this proposal first came up, somebody, and I don't think it was Mr. McMahon, said this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And I thought, well, maybe once in your lifetime, but I remember 1973. And so County of Avon was created. In 1996, it's broken up. Hereford and Worcester got together, and then they were split. So I think, to an extent, we're looking for, well, Mr. McMahon is looking for perfection, and you won't get it. I think we've got to really emphasise the importance of the communities. David Cameron talked about big society, and it's a society that will get us through the current economic, social, financial problems that we're having. And we've got to make sure that we put the boundaries wherever they fall, so that communities are not divided. And we remember the Boundary Commission and the controversy in North Gloucester with Elmbridge and Long Levens, excuse me, going into Tewkesbury, and how upset people were, and at the thought that the cathedral will become part of Forest of Dean district. So I think we've really got to look at where the natural communities see themselves and be guided by that. Thank you.
That was an observation, wasn't a question.
Well, I just come back to it. That's about the natural communities. I mean, it's also mentioned in the white paper and also in the letter from Jim McMahon about natural communities. In the white paper, it also mentions about the primary economic driver in an area has got to have serious consideration. Or the primary city in the area. Well, the primary city in Gloucestershire is Gloucester City. And therefore, it's important that it has a consideration over and above some other areas when we're looking at how you draw up local government in the future. But I quite agree with Angela. You've got to look at the existing the boundaries for the future. You know, somebody said to me, well, you know, you can move this and move that because, you know, some MPs, I think the best thing to do is have it based on their constituency boundary. Well, the constituency boundaries will be changed every 5 to 10 years. They're always reviewed because populations move and the population's new areas are built. But the council area is going to be there for, well, it has been the last time, more than half a century. So assuming we must base it on the local authority boundaries are going to be in existence for at least 50 years, if not more. And we only need to get it right. That's the important thing.
Thanks, Chair. In fairness, Councillor Chambers has raised quite a few of the points that I wanted to make. But I guess the bottom line is that this council is in no overall control at the moment. And I'm just really concerned that the first thing I found out about a Greater Gloucester was when I read it in the press. No one spoke to me as a group leader. I don't know whether you were spoken to about it. And so I just wondered, you know, you talked about the thoughts that you have. There hasn't been any consultation with this council about this proposal. And I just want to know how you're going to do that, because with respect, it's your idea, rather than something that is representative of this council, because this council hasn't been consulted or involved in any of that process.
Well, of course, the council wasn't involved in any of the process to propose a single unitary council, which was proposed by the county council leader just before Christmas almost. And similarly, the one that splits the county down the middle was proposed by 5 of the county's MPs, and that wasn't consulted with anybody either. And you know, and the way that it was carving up the county, it really is would be damaging for the city of Gloucester in the long term. And this proposal that was issued is just another option in the mix. And I just think it's important, as others have been promoting one option and then another option, that it was important that a third option was put on the table in the public domain. But quite clearly, there's lots of detailed work to do. You know, there's lots of detailed work to do, and there's about 6 or 7 work streams being done with all the county leaders. I'm meeting the council leaders every 2 weeks on this. So we should get to the point, Terry, where we've got enough detail of the options to then have proper conversations about them. At the moment, it's just far too early to have those proper conversations.
So I guess what I'm after is an assurance from you that you consult with this council and you seek the support of this council and the backing of this council and the 39 elected members. We are here to represent the people of Gloucester, and it's absolutely right and proper that 39 councillors' views are expressed. So I'm looking to you for an assurance that that will happen, and I want to know how you're going to do that, please.
I'll give you that assurance, though, that we need to have a lot of discussions about the options models. Similarly, there's a need for that to happen at Shire Hall. And they won't be talking really until after the county council elections now, when we look at what the models might be in. And we need a lot, we're going to need some conversations, maybe the Scrutiny will want to look at options as they're developing and challenge them. But we need to get to some point by November where the council has a settled will of what it wants to do. And it obviously, if it's, and it might well be that more than one option goes into Jim McMahon. But he has a couple of options that go in, and he's made it quite clear that if he gets more than one option, then he would. So you get to the point of two strong options, but they probably still need to be tested by the government, because the issue is what flex has the government got? You know, how hard line is it on? What is its red lines, and where does it? We haven't got to that point. And again, I think there's an opportunity to actually meet the minister as well and just tell him about the history of the place that is the city of Gloucester and its areas, and just make sure that whatever comes out of it, it's beneficial to the city of Gloucester, and we just don't get a raw deal. And there's a danger of getting a raw deal. That's the problem. And I think the county council's proposals, the attempt to rush at high speed would have given us a raw deal. That was my gut feeling, was what they were planning. Because every time we looked at, when we had Price Waterhouse and then we had other proposals, there was no mention about Gloucester. It's all about, it's going to save money, it's going to do this. Well, what about the city of Gloucester? What's going to happen to that? There was no conversation about that. And that's something that needs to be done. And that's my primary purpose, is to make sure that Gloucester gets the best possible deal, the best form of local government to serve it in the future. And it's about power, it's about influence. I know people talk about civics, but it's more about these things. It's about the power, about the influence, how you carry on developing your city. That's what's more important than having somebody as a civic leader. Any model will fit the civic leader. You're absolutely right. That's what Stephanie said earlier on. But it's about the power that you have to influence and progress projects in your community. And we've got to make sure we don't lose everything.
I'm trying to think of my next question. So, Anne Radley. Councillor.
That's okay. So thank you for that. I think I heard the word assurance. And okay, I think I heard that. But as I said, there are 39 members of this council. The council is in no overall control, and it is crucial that this council gets to debate that and are involved. And you'll come back to us and let us know how you propose to do that.
I think we can work that one through, can't we, John? And it's important is that we do have these conversations about the detail, and we do it without having party whips. We do it with everybody putting in their ideas, because somebody will pick up a point that nobody's thought about and challenge it, and that won't be a useful point. We need to make sure that those conversations that we have in looking forward are free and open across all parties as well.
So it's good that you're giving, sorry, it'll be just a quick question, Councillor Pullen and Councillor Chambers, the reassurances that they're after. So what reassurances will you be giving to all of the people in the parishes surrounding Gloucester City? I remember when there were almost tanks on the streets when we said we want Upton to come into the part of Gloucester. And I wouldn't want anybody, I wasn't involved that closely, but I wouldn't want to see you having to face all that. So how will you ensure that you capture their support, if it's there, to become part of a unitary Gloucester City? Upton, Churchstand, Brockwood, the places that you've mentioned. How will you achieve that other than by a one-off public meeting and a show of hands, which isn't very democratic?
So, Chair, I think absolutely, as part of any engagement exercise, as we work through these proposals, we would want to engage the parish and town councils and all of them. And indeed, I can give you an assurance that one of the work streams I'm involved with does have 2 representatives from GAPTA, which is the Gloucestershire Association of Town and Parish Councils. They have 2 representatives on one of the work streams. So they are engaged in the work at the moment. But we'd also want to, in particular with relation to some of these proposals, definitely want to talk to some individual parish councils, not least of which is Quedgeley Town Council.
I'm not sure I'm too convinced by that, with due respect. Upton St Leonard's begins virtually at the end of my road, and I know the strength of feeling that there is there. But Anne, I apologise, I said I'd be brief. Your turn.
Thank you, Chair. I was interested in the mechanisms of how consensus is going to be reached across the county. When I've been talking to other people, they've been talking in terms of mergers and acquisitions and takeovers, and so there's a real feeling of uncertainty. So I'd like to kind of understand how Gloucester City is communicating with the other districts and the county as kind of partners in creating something which will hopefully be better.
The letter that on the 5th of February makes it quite clear that there should be collaboration. And so there is conversations being taken place at this moment with Sir John, with the parish council areas, but also all the districts and the county council. So that's happening at the moment, and that's happening every 2 weeks, and the officers are meeting and looking at the plans. But the big problem, and the message I gave to David Miliband in 2005 was it was a real difficult one to solve in Gloucestershire. And
he went away and we never heard from him again. And others told him the same. And it's taken 20 years since then for the government to come back with proposals to look at Gloucestershire. And that's why rushing ahead, as the county council was going to do, was just wrong. It was just too fast. Didn't give anybody time to catch their breath. You know, Christmas took place, and you know the county was bidding to run the whole thing itself. So you just need to look at all the options and just look at how the details go. And I say things aren't going to progress a great deal until after the county council elections, and the new county council administration after that point might have a different view than the current ones got. But it will take time, and you know, we need time as a council to finish off projects that we've got started, finish off the form. We need to have time to get our joint strategic plan agreed with the other two district councils by 2026. We need time to deliver the Greyfriars project and other time to do other things. So just rushing ahead like that was just a nightmare. And the letter also makes it quite clear we've got to carry on doing the day job, and that means so I suspect this council will do its 4 years, and it will take time. It'll unfold. It's new territory for everybody. It will unfold. Ultimately, the government have got the power to impose, but also they're going to have to, by statute, consult. So I think that's going to be one of the things. Are you going to get agreements across the whole of the county? Probably not.
Thank you. And Councillor Condor made reference to it. I am one of the Elmbridge councillors, and Howard was an Elmbridge councillor at the time, and we knocked on a lot of doors, and there was a lot of confusion and a lot of indignation about being moved into what they considered to be Tewkesbury. It was greeted with bafflement and confusion because we don't feel a natural link with Tewkesbury. And now I receive information with a Tewkesbury-based North Cotswolds focus. I'm on the edge of that region, and much of that information does not relate to me and Elmbridge, and so I feel the line quite keenly. And so the opportunity to actually draw the lines in a meaningful way so that we won't necessarily replicate these sorts of unintended consequences is a great opportunity for us to take. And as somebody that's lived it, I hope we're mindful of it.
One of the advantages the problem there is to do with the boundaries of parliamentary constituencies. But one of the advantages of possibly having a Greater Gloucester Council, it would probably ideally suit the city having two members of Parliament, one for the north and one for the south. And of course, at one time, the city council boundaries were spot on identical to the parliamentary boundaries for Gloucester, but the growth in populations, the movements in populations have changed all that. And, you know, when I started off in local government, the ward boundaries and the county divisions were identical. The member of parliament was identical to the city council boundaries. It's all over the place now. Maybe we might be able to reshape that and get that sorted and tidied up for the future as well, with other forms of democratic representation. That's a thought that I have.
I'm sure that's a thought that could keep us here all night, but sadly it's 8:30 and we have to take a vote on whether or not we go on for another half hour. So looking around the room, the body language wasn't too supportive of carrying on for another half an hour, but I will put it to the vote. That's what the standing orders of the council say. We've got to put it to the vote. Do we carry on or do we call it a day now? Those in favour of carrying on? There must be somebody. No, take it. Everybody else says, no, let's curtail it now. All those in favour of stopping here at 8:30? Okay, you don't get a vote? I don't know. Okay. So, oh my goodness me, have you been listening outside? We've just closed the meeting.
Oh, you just closed it?
Yeah, we've just closed it, I'm afraid. That's the end of the meeting, sorry.